Hello, I'm Noel Kingsbury, and with Annie Gelfoyle, together we run Garden Masterclass. Welcome to our YouTube channel. We put here the recordings from the session we do every Thursday evening at 6 o'clock London time, a practice we started during the April 2020 lockdown as a way of reaching out to the global garden and landscape community. We hope you enjoy this recording, but also please do check out our website for all the amazing range of information-packed webinar and workshop recordings we have. Maybe consider joining us because members get access to our vast archive of free material as well as discounts on the webinar recordings. We've also recently started a podcast channel on Substack. So we do a weekly podcast so that's a way of accessing a lot of our recorded material that you can listen to whilst you're digging or driving or watering or whatever else. So I very much hope you enjoy this recording and looking forward to keeping in contact. So now this evening we've got Ursula Buchan, a garden writer who I think anyone of my age or a bit younger, and certainly older, would be a name we're very familiar with. I've been meaning to talk to Ursula for quite some time, so it's great to have you here, Ursula. Welcome.
Well, it's great to be on your show. Looking forward to it now.
You use that American usage, the show. Yes. Okay. Takes quite a while to sort of get used to that, but yeah, we allow it now. So, now, Ursula, you will never live down coming up with one of the most, should we say, salacious descriptions in garden writing. The Lady Hillingdon, good in a bed, but better against a wall. A phrase that I'm sure has haunted you ever since you put it.
I mean, I was only quoting a nurseryman from the First World War.
Okay, right. So you
about a rose called Lady Hillingdon.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, there was an irony there. She was very fond of roses, and I think she knew this nurseryman, and he named the rose after her. And it is a very good rose in any situation. It grows on a north wall here very well.
Yes,
But the joke is really that she is famous for a remark that really has gone down in history. When Charles comes to visit me at night, I lie back and think of England.
Oh, she came up with oh, how interesting. How interesting.
Yes.
Right.
So I wish I'd met her. She was obviously quite a character.
Quite a character. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, so now your name will also be very familiar to many people through the writer John Buchan. So I think before we go any further, I think we should hear more about who's your grandfather, wasn't he?
That's right. Yes, yes.
And it's certainly you're doing a lot to promote him and write about him. So please tell us about John Buchan.
Well, I mean, it's the 150th anniversary of his birth this year, so there are a lot of events actually, both here, Scotland, and in Canada, where he died in harness as Governor General in 1940. But he's known for a great many other things, being a man of letters, publisher, politician, as well as statesman, and a major figure really in the early part of the first half of the 20th century. And I wrote a biography of him called Beyond the 39 Steps, because a life of John Buchan, because I wanted to. I felt that his reputation, apart from writing this great seminal thriller, was fading, and that all the other things he did were being lost. So I wrote a biography of him. It came out in 2019, and I spent a lot of time talking about him since. But I'm not sure you really want to know about. You're more interested in Valerie Finnis in that context.
I think it's he was certainly a very, very interesting character, and I've just been reading up, swatting up on him actually just now. I think, gosh, what a rich and eventful life, and any life like that, any life fully lived, I think, is something of huge interest. What
Well, I
was?
think so, and certainly I find it. I mean, I try to be as as dispassionate as possible, but I couldn't fail but be inspired by his
Oh,
example.
yes, yes, yes.
Just because it's just astonishing energy and drive and
Yeah,
focus and humanity. And he
yeah.
was funny as well. He was witty and deeply loved by a lot of people. So yeah, I have to say I'm pretty proud to be his granddaughter.
I should imagine you are. Yes, yes. Good, good. So now, as a garden writer, you've pretty well retired, which is perhaps a little bit unusual. I think an awful lot of us just sort of will carry on writing until we drop. And I can think of various people who more or less did that. But you took a decision a few years ago to definitely uh, drop back from
Well,
gardening.
yes, I in 2011 I won a prize, an award.
Mm,
Um, for my columns in The Spectator. So I thought, well, this
yes.
is a good moment really to just step back a bit from the journalism,
Yes.
badly affected by the internet anyway,
Mm, mm.
and write books as well. So I wrote a book about gardening in the war, all the various aspects of it, but
Yes.
particularly the propaganda campaign,
Yes.
the
Yes.
Dig for Victory campaign, which I discovered was far less successful than everybody thinks it was,
Oh, really? That's
called
interesting.
A Green and Pleasant Land. And I
Yes.
enjoyed the research so much that after that I
Yes.
wrote the
Mm,
biography of John Buchan. But
yeah.
no, I really do enjoy writing books.
Mm, mm.
Um, that uh, they have a more lasting impact, I think, really. I mean, not that lasting, but they just feel a bit more permanent. That
Yes.
I still do write one column for the Field, in fact, but generally I don't write very much about gardening now.
No. No.
Um, yeah, well, there we are.
How did you come to gardening in the first place? And this is something we always ask people, but
Well, yes, I gardened. I came from a very big family,
mm.
um, and so the best way when I was a child to get my mother's attention was to garden with her.
Oh, really?
Yes,
Yes.
yes, because she was very keen,
Yeah.
not particularly knowledgeable, but we had a nice country garden,
Yes. Yes.
and it was just a very nice way to just to be with her.
Mm, mm,
And my father had left home when I was very small, so she brought us up herself. And then she died when I was 15. So
mm.
we parceled out the jobs in the house between us, and
Yeah.
I and one of my brothers ended up with the garden. And
Right.
so
Yeah.
I really started gardening rather earlier than most
Yeah.
people do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Perforce, actually, I didn't really have much choice, but I enjoyed it so much that when I left um, university, I spent a summer gardening for Nancy Lancaster at Little Hazley in
Really?
Oxfordshire.
Wow.
Yes.
Yes.
And
Ah.
we'll come on to Valerie in a minute because she got me the job.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And I loved it. I couldn't believe what fun it was. I mean,
Mm.
looking back, I was extremely fortunate actually because she
Yes.
was a remarkable woman, Nancy Lancaster, with a
Yes.
tremendous eye. And so after that, I applied to Wisley. There used to be, I don't know if there still is, you could do a year at Wisley. It was called a short term, and you were a short term entrant, and it was mainly for international students. But I did that
Mm.
because I was really too old to be a student because
Mm.
I was already 21. And I spent a year at Wisley, which I loved, going around the various departments.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
meanwhile, Valerie found me a couple more jobs.
Mm.
One in Holland, working for the very famous bulb firm Von Tuberger, now gone, sadly.
Mm.
And then in Belgium, working for Madame de Belder at Calmcloud.
All right.
So,
Okay.
and while I was there, I came home to be interviewed at Kew.
Mm.
And the great thing about Kew, the diploma course, is that you get paid because you work in the garden for 9 months of the year, but you get
Yes.
paid for 12, and the rest of the time you study. And it's just absolutely fantastic, especially for me because I'd already had a grant to go to university, so
Yeah.
I could not have contemplated it otherwise. So that's how I got into it, almost sort of by accident, because I couldn't really think of anything else I wanted to do when I left university, and I'm so glad I did because I just had a ball, an absolute ball.
Yes,
All
yes.
these
No.
years, I've just enjoyed it so much.
I think you better tell us a little bit more about Nancy Lancaster, which who a sort of legendary name for British gardeners, but perhaps not for everybody.
No, no. Well, she was a sort of upper class, if one can use that, Virginian American. Came
Mm.
from the South, and she was a niece of Nancy Astor, who was the first
Right.
British MP to sit in Parliament after the First World War. So she had very good antecedents, I think. Um,
Yes.
and she founded with John Fowler a interior design company called Colfax and Fowler, which is still going. So
Yeah.
you can see she had a very good eye, and she loved the English style, the English country house style. So both her house and the garden were very much, full of sort of overstuffed sofas and fires
Yes.
and flowers everywhere, and this apparently quintessentially English garden laid out in rooms. And it was just absolutely fascinating. And she had an old-fashioned head gardener called Mr. Clayton, who thought it was his job to treat me as a sort of apprentice, which was perfect. So I learned a lot there. I
Yeah.
really,
Yes.
and she was very hands-on. You would meet her in the garden very often. There's a picture actually in Garden People, the book of her deadheading roses, but she did a lot of gardening.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, she was a remarkable person.
Yes. Yes. And Madame de Belder at
Oh
Kalmthout.
yes, yes, another remarkable person.
Yes.
Um, uh, yes, she was Slovenian, I think,
She
and
was indeed. She was indeed. Yes.
yes, and she had looked over the garden wall one day at Kalmthout and met the owner of the garden, Mr. de Belder, and they married. She
Yes.
had been some kind of botanist or a plant physiologist. I mean, she was a trained scientist,
Yes.
and
Yes.
they made a fantastic partnership. Um, Both of the Count was an old nursery garden, so
Yes.
full of established rhododendrons, and it was sort of show garden originally. I mean, before the de Belders bought it.
Yeah.
But they also bought some land nearby to a place called Himmelreich, which means paradise,
Yes.
which
Yes.
is and it was, and that's where they developed this collection of Hamamelis and increased the rhododendrons as well. And famous Hamamelis that were developed there were Diane, which was her daughter, and in fact Jelena was
Yeah.
Madame de Belder. So these are very well known Hamamelis
Yes.
cultivars.
Yes. Yes.
And it's still going. I mean, it's the
Oh,
family's
yes. One of Europe's great arboretums, isn't it?
it really is. So I was there in the really hot summer of 1976, which was a huge drought, not just in the UK, but in Western Europe as well.
Yeah.
And the temperatures would easily rise to 40 degrees in Belgium that summer. So we used to work from 5 till 8 in the morning, and then again in the evening, and we would stay inside in the middle of the day. It was extraordinary. And our job was basically just to keep the rhododendrons alive
Yes.
by
Yes.
watering them,
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
those were both very formative experiences, as was the bulb nursery at Haarlem.
Yeah. Yes. Early, I suppose, around about 2000, I was quite friendly with a Slovene television producer who I'd met actually at Pete Audolf's, Stani
Oh yeah.
Schulz. And this, of course, Slovenia was sort of fairly newly independent, and the country was basically desperate to find anyone around the world who was famous of Slovenian heritage. This, of course, was years before the dreadful Melania Trump. Anyway, Madame de Bella was a terrific discovery for Stani, and he was always going over to and getting her to remember recipes from her childhood and got her making things in the kitchen. And of course,
Sure.
Stani was a very enthusiastic and knowledgeable gardener and botanist, and so a lot got done in the garden as well.
She was a remarkable person, very charismatic. She
Yes.
spoke a lot of languages very badly, often several languages.
I rather got the impression she was rather surprised to find that she had this whole new late life new career as a Slovene sort of lifestyle heritage TV star. But really, really rather wonderful.
Yes, absolutely wonderful. Yeah, yeah.
So now you've mentioned Valerie Finnis a couple of times. Now I'm very pleased to say that I did meet Valerie a few times. She was a wonderful lady, and I feel that I'm sort of just on that cusp of knowing a lot of the people. We've known quite a few people together, and Valerie was certainly somebody who was very special. So tell us about Valerie Finnis.
Yes. Well, she had been at school with my mother, and they'd been reintroduced sort of not very long before my mother died. And Valerie took me under her wing. She was then the head of the Alpine department at Water Perry School of Horticulture for women, which where she had studied as a student during the Second World War, and she'd stayed on. Because great alpine specialist, particularly saxifrages. And in fact, Water Perry still have the National Collection of Saxifrages, which dates really from Valerie's time. And in 1970, which was the year after my mother died, she up and left Water Perry and married a man called Sir David Scott and came to live in Northamptonshire, one wing of Boughton House, which is a ducal house outside Kettering. Because David was a cousin of the Duke of Buccleuch, and they lived in this one wing. And David had lived there for a number of years since he retired. He was much older than her. I think she was 47 and he was 84. And we all thought, goodness, what is this? But I mean, once you met him, you could see he was the most lovely man. I think he was the nicest man I've ever met in my life, and very funny and very, very intelligent and cultured. And he had a very interesting collection of paintings, particularly Victorian paintings that he had got together over a very long life. And they lived there very happily and he died aged 99. And she stayed on and lived until she died in 2006. But anyway, she took me under her wing. She found me these jobs. When I was at university, I used to borrow a car, drive over and garden there at the weekends. I mean, they were just terribly, terribly kind to me.
Yes.
And I owe them both a huge debt, which I hope now that I repay, at least in part, because I'm chairman of the Finnish Scott Foundation, but we might talk about that later.
Yes.
But anyway, she was a charismatic person, very, very attractive. I mean, quite complicated. But she loved young people. They obviously had no children, and she surrounded herself with young people. And if they showed any spark of interest in gardening, then she would take a lot of trouble with them.
Yes. I mean, it was her being encouraging. I think was certainly. I remember it was. I had my first time I was exhibiting at an RHS show, which must have been sort of around with my little nursery, which must have been sort of maybe 1987. And what I was doing was sort of relatively understated compared to some of the exhibits. Of course, we're talking about the monthly RHS shows at Vincent Square, sadly
gone.
But, one of the great London institutions for the many years that they ran, the two halls in just off Vincent Square in Westminster. And I remember Valerie coming along and sort of making sort of rather joking that what I had was nothing like as kind of in your face as some of the material there, and being hugely encouraging. And I think 3 shows later, I was there again, and it was the first time I think Carol Klein came to exhibit.
Oh, really? Yes.
Yes, in her sort of chaotic way. And Valerie again was hugely encouraging to again her talent and obvious flair for choosing wonderful plants and putting them together. So yeah, Valerie, yeah, I met her at Chelsea, and she was always one of those people who make an effort, and so
And she would always pick out the plant you were most proud of in an exhibit. She
yes,
had a wonderful eye.
yes, yes,
Which is the reason why she became such a famous garden photographer, of course. I mean, that was her real forte as
yes,
a garden photographer. And a lot of, I mean, garden photography has reached tremendously high
yeah,
levels of quality. But a
mm,
lot of garden photographers will name check Valerie as being
yes,
an
yes.
important influence on them.
So who was she publishing? Where was she publishing her work?
Oh, in magazines mainly.
Yeah,
Yes, yeah. She had a Rolleiflex, which
yeah.
is a second-hand Rolleiflex that she'd been given by Wilhelm Schacht, who was
Oh,
the
really? Oh, right. Yeah,
curator of the Munich Botanic Gardens.
yes,
And she was she was very parsimonious with film. She in the years when she lived at Waterbury, she didn't have any money really, and she would only ever take one image because film was so expensive.
gosh, yeah, those were the days. Yes,
Those
yes,
were the days,
yeah,
exactly. What
yeah.
she would have made of digital cameras, I have no idea.
No. Yeah. Yes, and of course, this you were the author of the book Garden People, which was basically her photographs of garden personalities. So, do tell us
Exactly.
about the book.
Yes, well, in fact, it wasn't my idea. It was a photographer called Howard Suley,
Oh,
who
yeah.
I'm sure you know. He encouraged her to pick out from her collection of 50,000 transparencies the most interesting pictures of people in gardens and talk about them. The book, and then I was asked to. Oh, there's Miss Havergal with her
Yes,
famous Royal Sovereign strawberries at
yes,
Chelsea. Miss Havergal being the principal of the Waterbury School
yes.
of horticulture for women, which actually closed a couple of years after Valerie left. She closed in 72, I think. But anyway, I can't remember what I was saying now.
Yes.
Distracted. They're the Pictons.
The book, Garden
Oh,
People.
yes, yeah. Well, I was asked to write the text for it. And so it was a collaboration with her, but sadly, she died just before it was actually published. She died in October 2006, and I think it was published in early 2007.
Yes.
But she had looked through the pictures.
Mm.
That's Jack Drake at Inshriach,
Yeah.
famous alpine nursery in Venetia. Oh, that's a Knight's Haze.
Yes, Heathcote Amery.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah, yeah. She because of this extraordinary ebullient personality she had, she could draw out the best from people, these plants people. And I think it was a very particular era. There's Marjorie Fish
Fish. Yeah.
at East Lambrook Manor, a very particular era after the Second World War. The sort of upper middle classes still had their big gardens, but they'd lost their gardeners to a very great extent, and so had to become gardeners themselves. And some of them became really, really keen and knowledgeable gardeners. And that's a Swan Hellenic tour in Greece that Valerie guided, I think. And people like Marjorie Fish. I'm trying to think of the others, Norman Haddon, people like that became really, really good I think that may be E.B. Anderson on the right. He's another
It is,
one.
yes,
Yes.
Wilhelm Schacht. Yeah.
With Wilhelm Schacht. Wonderful. And they would go around each other's gardens on a Sunday. So a lot of these pictures, they look quite smart with ties and, tweed jackets and things. E.B. Cook, perhaps. I'm not quite sure of that one. I love the Orbisha.
Yes,
Yes. And they were really knowledgeable plants people, with a botanical bent. And of course, that's Graham Stewart Thomas, of course,
yes.
who was Gardens advisor to the National Trust. And so these must have been very interesting sort of exchanges of ideas and plants. Lot of exchange of plants went on, and they were very, very generous.
Yes.
Plants people. I'm not sure I know who they are. But anyway, alpine specialists.
Yes.
And Valerie was very much in the swim. She was a judge, a show judge. She was on a couple of the RHS committees for many years. Those are the two Waterperry girls, so-called, Sybil Kreuzberger on the left and Pam Schwert on the right. And they were the joint head gardeners at Sissinghurst, in Vita Sackville West time, and then beyond.
Yes.
Well into the 80s, I think. There's Marjorie Fish on the left there with a Gerald Parkinson, I think. And a garden tour with Marjorie Fish apparently could take 5 hours. And they literally looked at every plant.
Yes.
And there's Nancy Lancaster, watering in the garden at the Coach House, Little Hazley. You can see how stylish she was. I mean, even in a gardener's apron, she looks really stylish. Very handsome woman. And with a tremendously good sense of humor. She can make you roar with laughter.
Yes.
Now, I can't see who that is, but it's obviously a cyclamen expert.
Dutch Thomas Hoog.
Oh, Thomas Hoch. And well, I worked for von Tubecher, which was his firm.
Yes.
Of course it is. That's exactly who it is. Yeah. So I mean, until she married, of course, Miriam Lane. Until she married David, she did a lot of touring, visiting gardens, lecturing, judging. And that went on after she went to Boughton, though perhaps not so much. This is Mrs. Lane, Miriam Rothschild, at Ashton Wold, just outside Oundle, and the great expert on butterflies and in fact fleas. Fleas were her.
That was her main specialism.
Yes, and I love the fact that there are daisies on the lawn and ivy going up the house, but there's still a silver teapot and 2 types of cake on the table.
I mean, she was really instrumental in the whole wildflower meadow movement, wasn't she?
No doubt, really important. Yes, with her famous Farmer's Nightmare seed mixture.
Yes. So from what I recall, the subtitle of Garden People is the Golden Age of British Gardening, or the Golden Age of Gardening.
Well, I mean that's a publisher's title, but there's something in that, I think.
Yeah. So I've been pondering on that, having been going through these photographs and the RHS website. I've certainly been thinking about that, and I think it's probably true. I mean, just the amount of expertise there was around in the kind of 1950s, 1960s, 1970s.
And also they could get their books published. The sort of really informed, what they call chatty gardening book. They weren't really chatty. I mean, they were really full of information, and they found it quite easy to get them published. And I think that's gone out of fashion, really.
Publishing is just a lot more difficult. I mean, talk to a publisher now, and the profit margins are so low. They're just playing it really, really safe.
Yes, yeah. So yeah, I mean, it was a golden age, whether it was the golden age, but it was I think for a particular sort of stratum of British society,
Yes, yeah.
um it was a wonderful time. A
Mm.
wonderful time. And Valerie and David used to have 2 plant sales every year in aid of the National
Yes.
Garden Scheme.
Mm,
And they
mm,
would raise substantial sums of money from the from propagating the plants in the garden at Boughton.
yeah.
David would do a lot of the propagation. And I used to go and help sell these plants, but they won't, none of them had any labels. So
Ah, really?
it was quite fraught sometimes. Valerie knew what they all were, but trying to sell them sometimes it was quite difficult. But
Mm.
it was fun, and a lot of people would come as much as 100 miles to go to those plant sales. They were really something
Yeah.
special.
Mm, mm, mm. And one of the things that strikes me, I mean, looking through Garden People, is the real focus on alpines.
Mm,
And certainly in my gardening and professional life, I feel I've very much seen a real decline in the whole alpine garden scene. But of course,
mm.
that was still a decline from the early 20th century when so many people were building these extraordinary rockeries, and growing alpines uh, was a major obsession for a lot of people. So Valerie was obviously very involved in that alpine world.
She was.
Yes.
She absolutely was. And as I say, was as a judge and as a lecturer. Yes, it's strange, isn't it, for fashions, things go in and out of fashion. You'd think alpines would be very popular now because they're so small.
Well, yes, yes, yeah, yes,
You can cram a lot in, and you don't have to have a rockery. In fact, mostly they do better in raised beds, actually, provided the substrate is right, don't they?
yes. I mean, I think
Or in, or in alpine houses.
there's somebody in the Netherlands who builds these extraordinary structures with, because there's no rock in the Netherlands, so building these structures out of essentially recycled materials, paving slabs, concrete, and all the rest of it. And some of them are, I mean, they're a kind of very urban, very modernist way of growing alpines, and can look spectacular. Uh, I suppose it's now crevice gardening. That is the sort of new thing in the in sort of Western US and Canada. I mean, I think perhaps crevice garden is the kind of rebirth of alpine gardening in another form.
I mean, I still think when I go to Wisley, for instance, I'm still bowled over by how beautiful those
Yes. Mm.
anthrosis and saxifrages and dwarf bulbs are in the
Yes.
alpine glass
Mm.
houses there. They're sort of perfect in a
Yes.
way, aren't they? But it does require a lot, I mean, to grow things to that standard, it does require a lot of care and attention, and perhaps people don't want to do that anymore. I don't know, but it seems a shame. I hope
Well,
they come
it
back
does.
into
It
fashion.
does. Yeah, there's so many, as you say, so many plants you can grow in a small space, but also the way that you can exploit all 4 points of the compass. So there are things that you can have
Right,
a south-facing wall and have a totally different flora on the north-facing wall.
exactly,
Which,
exactly.
with urban gardens, I mean, a gift, absolute gift.
Quite.
Yes. So now you mentioned the Finnis Scott Foundation, which
Yes, I'll tell you about that. When Valerie died in 2006, I was one of the executors of her will, and the will said that the very substantial art collection should be sold for charity, but that the executors had complete choice as to how they dealt with it. I mean, it had to be charitable, obviously, but we could decide. So the pictures were sold on a 2-day sale at Sotheby's at the end of 2007, I think, and the money raised, we founded a charity called the Finnis Scott Foundation, and the criteria that we devised were we wanted to help projects of a charitable nature in the plant science and horticultural sphere, and in art history and art pre-2000. So that's what we've done, and we invested the money, and we use the interest, and the investments are also growing, and so we have a substantial sum really to give away each year in grants, suitable grants. So anybody who thinks they have a project, a charitable project that might fit our criteria, should go on the website and see, because we're obviously always wanting the right sort of applications. And it will go on, I hope, in perpetuity, because, as I say, we're not touching the principle. We use the interest,
Yeah.
and I can tell you, it gives us enormous pleasure to, and we focus a lot on horticultural apprenticeships.
Yes.
Particularly obviously in public gardens, so in
Yes.
charitable institutions, and that seems to us to be very much the sort of thing that Valerie would have wanted.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
she had been so involved in practical horticultural training.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a almost infinite need for it. You know, I think it's been, well, it feels very worthwhile.
Yes.
But it's so important that the status of horticultural students and gardeners should be raised, because a head gardener in a big public garden is somebody with an extraordinary range of capabilities and attributes. And I don't think that's generally recognized. Would you agree?
Oh, totally. I mean, I think this is one of the real problems we face in the whole business, that gardeners are underrated. And I always say that, you know, somebody who's working outside, it's very difficult to actually incorporate them in the kind of working environment of, for example, a hotel or a nursing home or somewhere else where you've got a number of employees. The gardener is so often somebody who is a bit isolated, and of course it's a profession that does tend to attract people who actually, you know, do quite like their own company, and in some cases perhaps best have their own company. And I think I think the irony is that, you know, Britain is this country that has this worldwide reputation for our fantastic gardens, but horticulture as a profession doesn't have the status that it should. And well, I'm sure we could both get.
And the remuneration that goes that should go with that
Yes,
status.
yes.
But anyway, if we can at least ensure that gardens have apprentices that are properly trained by good head gardeners, then they are, you know, they go out into the world, as it were, to improve things.
We just had something come in on the chat. Please, could you give some examples of grant-aided projects?
Oh, right. Well, we help the professional gardeners. It's not called the Guild now. They have apprenticeships.
Professional Gardeners Trust?
Yes, that's right. We've helped garden house at Buckland Monacorum in Devon.
Yes.
Is another one. We've helped at Alnwick in the past. I mean, there are a great many, but we also do, because horticultural therapy is now well recognized as being extremely useful and positive in the treatment or the rehabilitation of people with mental illness, homelessness, drug addiction. I mean, all kinds of social problems. Horticulture is now considered, and community gardens considered, to be a good thing, and so we do get applications from a great many sort horticultural social projects
Yes.
as well.
Mm.
And yeah, so anybody who's interested should look on the website and see
Yes.
what we're up to.
Yeah. Yes. We'll I'll put the website up on the YouTube, whatever, and the Substack for the podcast, which we always do. We always try to give those links. Now, in your career, we have seen a lot of changes in British gardening. I mean, do you feel those have been good changes? Do you feel you've been part of those changes? And what do you feel has been perhaps the biggest changes?
Oh gosh, there've been gardening's much less stuffy than it was when I started, I think. I think it's much more inclusive, far more inclusive. I think there's much more emphasis on community projects, which I'm all for. Obviously, sustainability, biodiversity, climate change, these are things that are of great interest to gardeners now. I mean, I think our gardens no longer look as they did. The sort of the Gertrude Jekyll hangover is long gone now.
Yes.
And partly as a result of the new perennials movement. But I just think that people approach gardening in a different way now, or in some different ways.
Yes.
When I trained at Kew, I mean, there was an absolute avalanche of pesticides that we had to learn the names of, which, well, most of them are off the market now anyway, but
yes,
most people use very, very little, and very targeted if they do use. So that's been a huge change, I think. I mean, I remember Wisley spraying with DDT. Can you on the roses? Can you imagine?
Yeah.
1975. So we're not. We're talking not that long ago. And I think that the climate does feel rather more unpredictable. And that's a challenge for gardeners because they have to. I mean, when I first started, there were rules about when you did this and when you did that, and you pruned your roses in the second Saturday of March and that sort of thing. It was very prescriptive because people felt that years could be different, but within a sort of narrow confines. Whereas now, I mean, last year I couldn't sow any vegetables or hardy annuals outside till May. I've never known that before in my life. It was so wet. So I think that this is the great challenge for us: is to learn to be proactive. Our reactions, if you see what I mean. And not expect things to be the same as they were last year or 10 years ago.
Yeah. And perhaps we should end up by talking about what is your own garden like? Apart from having Lady Hillingdon on the north-facing wall, what else do you grow?
Well, I mean, we came to this garden. I mean, we bought the house for the garden. Some more than 30 years ago, in order that I needed a kind of laboratory because I was writing. I was the gardening columnist of the Sunday Telegraph, I think, at the time, and I needed to be able to do everything really: greenhouses, orchard, wildflower meadow, little wood, borders, lawn. I mean, I needed to have a crack at everything. And so it's still like that in a way. The honey fungus has begun to creep through my orchard, but generally, I mean, the thing that's given me the most pleasure is the little wood. I mean, it's a shaw really, has grown into something really quite mature. and I terribly enjoy the way it's brought in birds.
Yes.
I garden tremendously for wildlife.
Yeah. Yeah.
The badgers are very pleased to be digging up the worms in my lawn. But it, you know, it's English country garden.
Yeah.
I don't open it for the National Garden Scheme. I open it for the church and for the Red Cross sometimes, but because I don't have enough help in it really for it to be really neat and tidy all the time, and nor actually do I want it to be completely neat and tidy all the time. It gives me the most enormous pleasure. But gradually over the years, I've made it a bit simpler than it was.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a horrible soil.
You said clay.
Nasty alkaline clay.
Yes.
But it's amazing what you just have to garden on top of it, really.
Yes, and I think a lot of things actually quite like that. I mean, they once they get their roots down.
Well, certainly the trees. Yeah, I mean, you know, they're all native trees in the woodland.
Yeah.
The ash are under pressure now, obviously, but you know, I was amazed how quickly the oaks grew.
Well, yeah, if they go on a good soil, they can take off really fast, can't they?
Yes, yeah. And the yew hedges didn't take that long. No. It's divided like most gardens. It's divided into rooms with walls and hard, you know, bit of hard landscape as well. And what do I get the most pleasure from? Spring bulbs, irises, roses, Philadelphus, anything scented. You know.
Yes.
I've always been hopeless at houseplants, and I live in a drafty, dark cottage, so they don't do very well. I'm an outdoor gardener, really, I think.
Yes. I actually find very few gardeners are very good at houseplants. It's always been a slight mystery to me. But
do you think that's right? Do you? I mean, there's some that really major on it.
A good indoor gardener is rarely a good outdoor gardener, and vice versa.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. Well, I'm definitely an outdoor gardener.
Yes. But no, the dark cottage is certainly not a houseplant friendly environment, is it?
No. But you can't have it all.
No. Right. Well, been wonderful talking to you, Ursula. Hope I can come. Hope I can come and visit sometime, and very much looking forward to the new edition of Garden People coming out, published by Thames and Hudson.
Yes, on April the 24th, I believe.
Yes.
And they've done a good job of it, and I think it'll be. I hope it will get a new audience. It won a prize when it came out first time round in 2007. The Garden Media Guild called it the Enthusiast Book of the Year. So, you know, it has a sort of provenance. But anyway, yes. Anytime you're passing, we'd love to see you, Noel.
Thank you.
Yes, and thank you very much indeed for inviting me on. I've enjoyed it very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your time, and good evening.
Okay, bye.
Bye.